Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes,
Hi. Hello. I'll put on my camera real quick so people can see me.
Can I open the meeting before
yes.
we're here for a public hearing? Today is Monday, November 13, 2016. The time is 1900 hours. Location, Community Board 12, Town Hall, 4101 White Plains Road, in the Great Borough of the Bronx, New York. We'll be meeting via WebEx. You have to appear on the screen if you come in via WebEx, and you must identify yourself. And we're here to discuss the city of Yes, also known as a few other adjectives. So, do we have anybody here for the city planning?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Yes. I'm good to introduce myself. I know you all know my colleague Nate Heffron. My name is Brenna Hemmings. I am from the Bronx Borough office, and I will be taking over as a liaison to this community board. Like it was introduced in the meeting, myself, Nate, and a colleague of ours, Carolyn, we will all be presenting on the City of Yes, the second citywide text amendment. This one is zoning for economic opportunity. I'll be sharing my screen and just giving helping with the presentation and leading it. And Carolyn is especially here to answer any specific questions that y'all might have. I will do my best. Carolyn has been working on this for a very long time, so I defer to her because she knows. But in terms of local knowledge, Nate and I will be able to help with any questions there. I hand it off to Carolyn from City Planning.
Hi, everyone. Carolyn Grossman-Marm, the Director of Economic Development at City Planning, and really excited to be here with you tonight. As Brenna said, I'm not the local expert, so I'm going to defer to her to talk through how this affects the board, but I'm really happy to be here to answer questions. We know this is a complicated text affecting the whole city. So, really happy to be here to help you understand today what we're trying to achieve, answer any questions, and make sure we can get information to you to help you, guide you through the process.
Okay. You want to make a little presentation on what the city of Yes is? I've heard it twice before. I just want to hear a little more about it.
I think Brett is just trying to get the presentation loaded.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I'm not as familiar with everyone on the board. Would we should everyone else on WebEx introduce themselves, or should we just like jump into the presentation?
Let's jump into the presentation.
Sure. Okay. I will do that. Let me just share my screen. Perfect. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So we'll start with this presentation. So as I've said before, my name is Brenna Hemmings. I wanted to thank everyone on this committee for coming out and for allowing us to come present to the Land Use Committee for this City of Yes citywide text amendment. Okay, so the presentation, Nate is going to do the first couple slides. This presentation is about 26 slides. If anyone has questions about any of the proposals as they come up, like please let me know. The proposals are divided between 4 different goals. And after each goal, after I've done the introduce the proposals for each goal, I can stop and, see if anyone has any questions. Does that sound okay?
Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. So, Nate, this is you, title slide, and on to the second slide.
All right. Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again for having us tonight. Again, my name's Nate Heffron from the Department of City Planning, and I'm disappointed to be leaving you as your community board liaison. You will be in the very trusted and capable hands of Brenna here. So I'll start off with just an intro of our text amendment and our presentation tonight, and then Brenna will take over and talk more about the proposals and go into a little bit more detail about them. So this initiative is part of our Mayor Adams City of Yes, of part of our initiative to try to revamp our zoning text and bring it into the 21st century. It's one of 3 text amendments. If you remember, I was back here before you in the summertime talking about zoning for carbon neutrality. So this is the second of 3 text amendments that'll be coming your way. It's referred out to every community board. And this one is called zoning for economic opportunity. So can you go next slide, please? So zoning for economic opportunity, it's about our commercial districts. It is largely going to be affecting our commercial districts and some of our manufacturing districts. So I want to start with like just a quick lesson about sort of how our commercial zoning works in New York City. So in front of you on this slide, you see the breakdown of all of our commercial districts. They start with the letter C and go all the way up from numbers C1 all the way through C8. So just a little bit about each district. The C1 and C2 districts, those are mostly your like retail corridors, a lot of your neighborhood commercial that you see on a pretty regular basis. These are like corridors like your White Plains Road or East 233rd Street, sort of excuse me, part of Gun Hill Road. C3 districts deal with maritime uses or like maritime businesses. You don't really see any of these in CB12. These are more like, Throgneck, City Island type areas. C4 districts are sort of like your bigger destination type of retail locations. So a lot of like Fordham Road is mapped C4, for example. Malls tend to be C4. There's a little bit of C4 district on Boston Road, actually. C5 and C6 districts, not really as relevant for CB12 either. These are mainly your big office type of districts that you see a lot more in Midtown and places like downtown Brooklyn and those types of areas. C7 districts deal with amusements and amusement parks. So pretty much mostly Coney Island, but a fun trivial fact about the Bronx, there's a very small bit of C7 zoning from when there used to be an amusement park where Co-op City is now. There's a small remnant of that there. And then C8 districts are districts that start to get more into like industrial type of businesses, but these are more for like auto related uses. So there's a lot of C8 districts along Boston Road, for example. And then just really quickly on our manufacturing districts that would also be affected by these text amendments that they generally go from M1 to M3 from light manufacturing all the way to like very heavy manufacturing. So next slide, please. So the zoning, how does like zoning affect our businesses in New York City neighborhoods? Zoning really tells us where we can put things and what types of uses can occupy certain types of spaces. So that tells you like where you can open your business, like what can you do in your space, where can you expand your business. A lot of the zoning regulations that we have in place are really designed to make things try to create like more order in the city and try to prevent things that are not so favorable uses next to places that are like residents, for example. Like we don't want to have factories opening up right next to schools. So there's a lot of rules in our zoning text that tell us like what we can and can do with our businesses and the types of spaces that we can use them in. But as we can see sometimes, like many times these types of zoning regulations can actually get in the way of helping to facilitate our businesses and expand them. Next slide. So again, this is the second of 3 citywide text amendments that we're bringing before you. So these are referred out to all 59 community boards and each borough boards and borough president's offices. This was officially referred out at the end of last month. And like I said before, you already saw zoning for carbon neutrality, which was officially passed the city council last month. And then coming on later in the spring of next year will be zoning for housing opportunity. Next week. So there was, I think, uh, this will be the last slide before give it over to Brenna, but just a little bit of the background of what we've been doing here with these text amendments. So for this one, there's been 5 info sessions that were open to the public and meetings with over 100 stakeholder organizations. These are experts, subject matter experts and business organizations throughout the city, including a lot of Bronx businesses such as many Bronx business improvement districts and other organizations like the Bronx Chamber of Commerce or some of the folks that were involved and offered their input and really helped to refine these proposals that you're about to see. And we can go on to the next.
Perfect. So thanks for that, Nate. As you've said, the City of Yes, citywide text amendments, there are 3 of them. The one that we're presenting on tonight is about just some of trying to undo some of the ways that zoning has just limited what people can do in certain places and just how it affects the city. So this here is just like a cute little infographic, just showing some of the issues that we might be addressing with the text amendment. So the slide after this is the proposals. I'm just going to go through them this is very short, but then the next couple slides go into them in more detail. So there are 4 goals of this citywide text amendment. The first goal is to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. And this would happen by lifting barriers so that businesses can be closer to their customers. Goal 2 would boost growing industries and reduce obstacles for new types of businesses. Goal 3 enables more business-friendly streetscapes and would deliver active, safe, and walkable streets for businesses and residents. And goal 4 would create opportunities for businesses to open by establishing new zoning tools to boost job growth and business expansion. So I know that people on the call, I had sent this presentation to George a couple days ago. The way this presentation is going to go is that we have these things called applicability maps, and it looks at, like Nate was talking about when he did the short lesson on commercial districts. There are certain maps that show the concentration or the amount of certain districts there are within Bronx Community District 12. So I'll be going through those, and some of them, there really isn't any C5 or C6 in this district. So those maps are going to be blank, but I just left them there for illustrative purposes. So summary of proposals. So goal 1 is to, like I said, make it easier to find space and grow. The first proposal, there are 6 proposals in this. The first one would lift time limits to reactivating vacant storefronts. The second one would simplify rules for business types allowed on commercial streets. Number 3 would expand opportunities for small-scale clean production. Number 4 would modernize loading dock rules so businesses can adapt over time. Number 5 would enable commercial activity on upper floors. And proposal 6 would simplify and modernize how businesses are classified in zoning. Carolyn, I know that that might be one of the things people have questions on. So could you talk a little bit about how you looked at reclassifying some businesses and maybe some of the specific issues that we might be helping to remedy? Okay. I was
Sure.
thinking. Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Brenda. And I'll just step back and say, from our perspective, a lot of what's driving the desire for these classifications, and admittedly, a lot of the changes in this proposal are about the fact that our rules governing commercial zones that we showed, the C1, C8s, and how uses are defined for those different areas, what can go where, how different kinds of businesses can operate. All of those rules were written in the 1960s, right? And I think we all here know that the economy of New York City has changed, immeasurably since that time in the 1960s. The city had a very industrial economy. There was industrial businesses were super dirty. We had things in the city like telegraph offices, but no one had ever heard of a cell phone. So when we look at how uses are defined in the zoning resolution today, it's a relic of that old economy. So literally, things like telegraph offices have a very specific definition, but a cell phone store is not defined anywhere. So what we're trying to do, actually, let me also say, the consequence of that is that it's not always clear where businesses can locate in the city, right? Now, there's a lot in this proposal that is about actual changes, right? So for instance, small scale pre-production, we're really trying to bring a new kind of business into commercial areas. But proposal 6 here is entirely about clarity. We're not trying through this proposal to change what can go in any place. We're trying to make the organization of the zoning resolution easier for normal people to read. And that means particularly small business owners. We are very aware that, if you can hire a high-priced attorney to figure out where you can locate, you might be fine. You might be able to solve the problem through money and time. But regular people who are just trying to open up a store on Boston Road or Gun Hill Road, may just can't read the zoning resolution. So the proposal is a reorganization of what we call use groups, which are the way that we categorize the kinds of businesses that can go into each of the commercial districts. It creates new categories of use groups from 1 to 10 that put more natural things together. Retail businesses, places of assembly, production businesses into much more natural categories. So it's easier to understand where, which one you're in. We're updating the actual use terms using federal data about the kinds of businesses that exist in New York City and using that to help us future proof. So for instance, you might, we won't necessarily know what the next AI business is, but we can create different kinds of production categories that will better capture future businesses within them. And then we're, retiring terms like telegraph office and adding things like cell phone repair to try and make sure that we're updating for the kinds of businesses we do see. Again, for proposal 6, this is not one that we're trying to introduce a whole lot of new uses. It's entirely about clarity, better language, and better usability. So we're not costing people money just in trying to understand the zoning resolution itself.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Okay, so goal 2, support growing industries. The only one that really doesn't have much applicability for Community District 12 for the Bronx is number 8, to give life science companies more certainty to grow. That was the only one of these that really didn't affect the district. And goal 3 is to foster vibrant neighborhoods. And lastly, goal 4 is to create new opportunities for businesses. So the next slide, this is more of the in-depth. The slide before was the summary. So this is what Carolyn was talking about. So sorry to mess up your name. 1, reactivate storefronts, allow closed storefronts in residential areas to reopen. 2, simplify district types. 3, enable more small scale production. 4, no more unnecessary loading docks. 5, allow commercial on upper floors. And we want to enable renovations or new construction of mixed-use buildings in these places where it makes sense by allowing commercial uses at the same level or above residences, provided that complete separation between uses is maintained. And proposal 6, to modernize use terms. This is exactly what Carolyn was talking about, just making it a lot easier and much, simpler to read through and more inclusive as well. So, does anyone have any questions about any of the proposals for goal 1?
I have a question, Pete. And it's not, basically, it's relative to this and not relative to this. Many blocks, especially even here along White Plains Road in Ward 12, when a store closes up, he can't survive in his business anymore. So the next thing that happens, a church moves into that store. Before you know it, you have 5 or 6 churches on the block where they used to have 12 stores, now they only got 6 stores. And it makes it, not that churches are bad, I'm all for them, but it makes it less appealing to shop on that block because the churches are not open all the time. The businesses are, but why go in a block where you only have 6 stores with availability for 12 stores? And are you going to address that in this community? Because there's a lot of areas in this community that exist here now.
Yeah, Brenna, I can take that if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sure. So it's a great question. And while we're skipping a little bit ahead to goal 3, I'll say that kind of condition has been on our mind, and churches aren't the only use that we see having what we think of as sort of a deadening effect on what like it could otherwise be a really active street. The way we're thinking about this, right, and it's worth keeping in mind, the city has experienced a real economic crisis here. Vacancy is a challenge. We're looking to put more uses into storefronts, right? So we don't want to be against, as you say, a church occupying a storefront. Just as I think we're trying to be a little bit more creative and flexible about different kinds of businesses that might occupy a storefront, like the clean manufacturing uses that we've seen. We think those are ways to address vacancy. But we want to make sure that as we introduce that flexibility in use, that we're really protecting the vibrancy of active retail corridors, right? Because as you say, one use, then a next use, then a next use, and all of a sudden, what used to feel like a really vibrant, shopping street feels like something different. The way we're addressing that is through design controls. So when we've done rezonings for different neighborhoods, we have over the last 20, 30 years, put rules in place in some particular neighborhoods to protect against that loss of a sort of storefront character through rules like an active ground floor, right? That you can't brick up, the front and lose your windows, that you can't put, all of your parking right in front, like on an active shopping street, right? That like there are sort of tricks of the trade from a design perspective that help us keep that sort of storefront look, even if the uses are changing. Unfortunately, those design rules don't apply anywhere in the city that we haven't done a rezoning, because we've applied them sort of neighborhood by neighborhood. So we're introducing a set of new rules that are trying to be to give you that sort of protection on your streets, but to be a little bit flexible. So we're not applying the same rules, on a street that has like a lot of car-oriented businesses as we would in Midtown Manhattan, right? They look very different, but we're trying to give everybody a little bit of protection to make sure you don't end up with blank walls, really inactive uses where you expect that activity to be there. So that's really a long answer of saying we're sort of trying to think of it not from the use perspective, but from the form perspective, to keep that ground level expectation of storefront after storefront where you've had it in the past.
Hey, Carolyn, this is George. I have a question in regards to that, because you're asking us for a zoning change. And generally speaking, zoning changes require use groups. Most of the commercial stuff that we see is use group 6. Can you give us a specific example? So for example, Boston Road, I recall Carolyn Samuel coming to us, the director of city planning in the Bronx, came to us many years ago for a design charrettes on Boston Road because of, as you say, the commonality of the car use groups that are there. We have a lot of different mixed commercial. And we were very receptive to it, and then COVID hit, and then a lot of things hit, and it seems to have fallen by the wayside. You guys got caught up with Jerome Avenue rezoning, and you really haven't done a much larger rezoning, targeting one specific area. So you wanted to start doing Boston Road. How would what you're proposing help us in this example? What is it that you're going to change? Are you going to encourage more car dealerships on Boston Road so that they're more like uses on Boston Road? Or are we going to try and use zoning to eliminate the car uses so that we have better uses? And then secondly, in that same vein, I don't know what design has to do with zoning. That's a completely different animal. But if you can explain that as well, which you just spoke about, because we do have a lot of vacant storefronts on White Plains Road. How does this zoning change? How do you use zoning to create the storefronts?
Yeah. So when we talk about I'm going to start with the second part and then I'll try and come back to the first part. When we talk about design in zoning, it's how we regulate within the zoning lot, what can happen, sort of on the facade, within the property. So things like, do you have to have a glassy facade? Do you have to have transparency? Can you build a curb cut? Can you put parking, in the front, like a strip mall, or do you have to maintain what we call the street wall, right? And build a building or maintain your building, contiguous to the rest of a walkable street? Do you have to have, can you have a lobby that extends 200 feet, or do you have to have, some form of commercial activity? So those are the kinds of tools when we talk about design that we deploy. Brenna, you'd have to double check for me, but I'm pretty sure that, and we can also follow up with this, that White Plains Road is in what we call tier C of our new design rules, which means things like protections against drive-throughs, and really, like very auto-oriented fronts, right? So that you wouldn't have in the future somebody like cutting up the middle of your of an active storefront street and then putting, a very like parking lot focused frontage onto the street. So to the extent that that's about, like car dealerships and that kind of thing, some of these new rules would protect against that from that design perspective, but not speak to the use. Now we are also updating some of our rules about how auto repair works. But I'm not, I want to clarify if your concerns were about auto repair or car dealerships, because we do treat those a little bit differently under zoning.
Well, we have both on White Plains Road.
Yeah.
We have both on Boston.
Yeah.
And
So
Carolyn, just
Yeah.
real quick, like some example. So Boston Road is like C4, like between East 213th and Eastchester Road. And Boston Road also is like M District, and then White Plains Road is like C1. If that helps.
Yeah. So the M's are a little bit different and a little bit more liberal because we're a little bit more tolerant of truck type uses in our industrial zones. But in the commercial areas, in the future, as I said, there would be sort of those physical protections. You wouldn't get drive-throughs, you wouldn't get all the parking pushed to the front. So we wouldn't outlaw a car dealership from going from there, but we would physically require any new buildings there to orient in a way that was a little bit more responsive of the street. And if it's helpful, we can send you some pictures, in follow-up that sort of describe what that looks like, right? there's sort of little design tricks that we build in to make sure that when people build new buildings, they're, you know, they're, even though they allow for cars, right? We don't want to, you know, where it's appropriate, for a car dealership, you got to have cars. But we would make you build it in such a way that it's a little bit better for the way that the street lays out. And then I'll just say on auto repair, we similarly, we're going to continue to allow auto repair, but for new auto repair uses, there will be a BSA's permit attached to that. I think I'm skipping way ahead now. That's in goal 3 as well. But we're attaching a BSA permit to make sure that we also get a little bit of site plan review, because we know that auto uses, they're the one use that you kind of see a lot on a commercial street, but everywhere across the city you have that challenge of businesses using the sidewalk or the curb to sort of spill business outside. So we want to allow them because we think people need them and rely on, you know, getting your tire repaired, but we want to make sure that you know, when we can, that there's some ability to look at the use to make sure it fits inside its zoning lot and that you don't get new ones sort of spilling out into the street. So a little bit more protection there. And again, that's goal 3 is really about protecting the streetscape and putting those protections on as we create a little bit more flexibility on use through all of the other goals, right? We think that's how we balance this, helping businesses thrive, but also protecting our retail streets. Is that helpful? Answer the question?
I know you have a lot more to go through, so you can go through it unless my board members have more.
I actually have a quick question. My name is Bobby. Is the text amendment available? Is that something that has been released and we can review? Or because I'm hearing a lot about, you know, what the goals of it, but I haven't seen the actual text amendment.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is available. It's been provided to the board, and we can also put in the chat the link to it online. There are a couple of resources on our website, including, because the text is quite long, there's some sort of comment, we call it annotated text amendment that sort of helps try to walk you through what each of the sections are doing. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot, because this is an organizational text amendment, it's very long because things are moving around a lot. So we also try to guide through that and say, like, this section came from here, this section used to be over here, to really help you. And we can also provide, I think we have a summary of how the 18 proposal that we're describing map onto the different sections of the zoning resolution. So those are available. They have been, I think, provided, but we can, and great, Nate has put the link in the chat already.
Yeah, and at the end of this presentation, there is that slide that Carolyn was talking about that shows the exact ZR sections that correlate to each proposal and each goal.
Nate, can you email that to us? That link that you just put in the chat? Do you mind just emailing it?
It's on the presentation we sent.
That's our link. You just click on it.
Yeah.
I can shoot in a quick email too. No problem.
Thank you, Nate. Bobby, I'll send it to you.
The president, the link that you sent, I didn't see the link.
Great. Does anyone have any more questions on, well, I feel like we've gone through goal 3 a bit. Goal 2, either goal as of right now, I can go through the presentation and people can keep on peppering questions in as they come up.
Right.
Okay.
You can continue.
Oh, sorry.
You can continue.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, so as Carolyn was saying, goal 3, fostering vibrant neighborhoods.
Oh, Carol, Brenna, hold on.
Can we go back to goal 2? I'm just.
Sure.
My only question about goal 2 is life sciences. You said that it wouldn't be applicable in District 12. Would you be able to explain why?
I was going off of the applicability maps that were prepared. So let's see if I can get to it really quickly. It was the applicability. I can just go through it real quick. That's fine. Okay. These are like the applicability maps. This is free for all. But they weren't uplifted in any of the materials that I had seen. So I'm not too sure why they wouldn't be. Oh, Carolyn, please.
Yeah, I'll just say that might just be a weird typo, and I apologize for that. They are applicable in these districts. Well, let me step back and explain what we're doing on life sciences, and I think there may be some thinking here that they may not realistically be that meaningful, but let you be the judge of that. So life sciences, there's a couple of things we're doing. The first thing is we're updating the definition of a laboratory. So today, as I've said a number of times, you know, across the zoning resolution, we find these definitions that go back to the 1960s that don't relate to the industries we have. Life sciences, the definition of a lab talks about dentures. It's like dental labs and making teeth. It has no bearing to the kinds of research and sort of cutting edge science that we see happening in New York City today. And this is a really growing and important driver of the innovation economy in the city. So what's happened over time is that as businesses are looking to create new research laboratories in the city, they're looking at this ancient definition and running into problems. 5 years ago, there was work done with the Department of Buildings to try and create some interpretation memos that helped with that. But even with that, we have continued to hear about real businesses that may spend hundreds of millions of dollars in New York City that are being waylaid not because they're not allowed, but because this definition is so weird. It's not clear if the kind of research they're doing is in fact allowed in our commercial districts. So we're rewriting the definition to be much more plain English about, you know, a research lab to make sure that they can locate in our commercial districts. Now, that does mean that they can locate in C1s and C2s, which are primarily what you see in your neighborhood streets. But the reality is where we see labs going most of the time in the city is higher density commercial areas. There's a lot of interest in some of our you know, vacant and underoccupied office stock and near research campuses. So certainly the largest nodes in the city, Alexandria down by NYU, Columbia, certainly growing in Morris Park around Einstein and Montefiore. So that's the kind of locations where we think that that's more viable. Yeah, so let me stop at that. That may be a little bit of where the confusion came from. The definition does apply in your district and to all commercial districts, but it's just less likely to be used given the size of buildings that are possible in C1s and C2s as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Apologies on my end. So these proposals, proposal 7 is for urban agriculture and would explicitly permit indoor agriculture in commercial areas. We would clarify that indoor agriculture is allowed in C districts, so more food can be grown closer to communities. Carolyn just went over the life sciences proposal. Proposal 9 is for nightlife. And we would be simplifying the rules so that activities such as, you know, hosting concerts, dancing, comedy shows, or open mic nights would be based on the size of the venue rather than the activity. So you would only see small venues in neighborhood commercial corridors and larger venues in places like Midtown. Proposal 10 is for amusements, and we would simplify and modernize how zoning treats amusements and recreational activities to make clear these businesses are allowed indoors and at a small scale on a neighborhood street and at a larger scale in office districts. And lastly, proposal 11 for goal 2 is for home occupations, and it's to allow New Yorkers more flexibility to have businesses in their homes. We're proposing to enable entrepreneurship with modern rules for home-based businesses while keeping in place safeguards to ensure that any home-based businesses are being good neighbors. And any questions on 2? Because I might go through 3 a little bit quicker since there were questions. Yes.
Can you maybe use the nightlife example or nightlife as an example of, you know, if I'm a business and I want to have a dance club, how the new rules would operate versus the old rules?
Yeah, let me jump in on that, and you'll hear me say this probably 100 more times as we go through this. The rules that govern nightlife were written in the 60s. Actually, go back farther. There's a really discriminatory history that goes back to Prohibition about how New York City regulates nightlife. So they're antiquated and they're really quite crazy. So what I mean by that is on any retail street in the in the Bronx, say, so the C1, C2s, you could have a restaurant that has a string quartet playing in the background. You could have a rock concert with tickets up to a capacity of 200 people. So like not a big rock concert, but like a storefront rock concert. But you can't have slam poetry night. You can't have comedy club night in the same space. And if somebody tried to dance to the rock concert, they'd be making a zoning violation. So what I mean by the rules are really specific to allowing for music in a restaurant or a scheduled musical entertainment, but they ban dancing specifically, and they also ban non-musical entertainment. So what we're proposing to do is say, we don't care if people want to dance, like a little bit, like shimmy. We don't want zoning to be in the way of that. But we do want to make sure that what I think of as a nightclub, like Studio 54, or, like something big, is not on every neighborhood street. So the 200 person capacity is which is already in the books a little bit here. We're expanding that to be the definition between really small and large nightlife establishments. If you're a local bar, size of a normal storefront, think like 25 feet wide, right? Like just like a small establishment, maximum capacity in a place like that is usually about 200. They want to have, dancing in the jukebox in the back. That will be legal under zoning. We will remove the words that say the second one person is dancing, you are no longer allowed. If you want to be a place that is more than 200 people, you're only allowed in the C4s and above or in an industrial area. So effectively Midtown and, away from residences. So that's the way this will work in the future. Sort of a difference between the future definitions will really put all scheduled entertainment together. It won't matter if you're a rock show or a dance club or a comedy club. You'll all have to obey by that 200 person maximum on a neighborhood street.
So, hi, so if this goes through, then you're saying that eating and drinking establishment with entertainment could have a max capacity of 200 people? That's what you're saying?
In a C1 and a C2.
Okay, so, but that's not the rule right now. So you're saying that under the new rule, you guys are gonna allow that?
In under today's zoning, you can't dance at all.
Well, I thought the Blige administration, that was taken away, the cabaret use for 12 situation.
Yeah, the sad thing about the cabaret law is it didn't finish the job. So I think there was an enormous amount of excitement about the repeal of the cabaret law, as well there should be, but the zoning is still on the books, so it actually didn't make it legal in a lot of cases.
So under your proposal, you will eliminate that and allow eating and drinking establishment with entertainment, live entertainment and dancing with a capacity of 200 people on a 25 frontage lot?
So what I keep saying 25 foot to help you understand what 200 person capacity means. When you look at like how it lays out, that's roughly the size. So so yes, we would finish the job of the cabaret law, and we would allow for eating and drinking establishment with scheduled entertainment to occur up to a 200 person capacity on neighborhood retail streets.
But it's still,
Go ahead, Lou.
it's still, the building's, certificate of occupancy, let's say the certificate of occupancy limits your establishment to 75 people. That would still be, even though zoning allows for 200 potentially, if your certificate of occupancy says only 75 are allowed, then that would. Okay.
That's right. So we're talking about establishments, like an establishment that has an occupancy of up to 200 is who could access this rule. Nothing about zoning is going to change the regulation of what the fire and DOB say you can occupy. And I should also say nothing about what we're doing under zoning changes what you all do with the state liquor authority and any other rules governing that particular establishment. So it may still be the case that some bars cannot have dancing, even though the zoning says it's possible, because arrangements were made as part of their liquor license, and we're not affecting that here. This is a complicated, multi-layered, oversight process. We're removing one more, very out of date, sort of anachronistic rule that applies, blanketly across the city to make dancing impossible in most locations.
So Carolyn, I can appreciate that, but I think that you're actually missing the point on this, especially from the community board's perspective, in that enforcement is difficult. So we have commercial districts that are literally right next door to private homes. So the NYPD, which doesn't get any help from the state liquor authority, or for example, the mayor's, I don't even know if you have a nightlife czar anymore, but you used to have one under the de Blasio administration. She was useless. And we have to use technical codes that are within the building department and in the zoning so that we can go after these type of establishments, because nobody's enforcing that law except for the NYPD because they took a shooting there or something.
Yeah.
Because SLA is not taking away their liquor license, regardless of whether the community board supports it or not. So the idea that you're making it easier for these establishments to exist and making the zoning easier for them to do what they want to do is not a benefit for the community board or the NYPD that's trying to enforce shutting down some of these locations.
Yeah, look, I hear you, and we've heard this. You're not alone. Like we understand that there is a real enforcement challenge here. What I would first of all, I do want to acknowledge we're working very closely with the mayor's office of nightlife, so they do exist. I think there's some status about getting the head of it. I think that hasn't been announced, but there is a great staff over there. They're constantly working with boards all across the city to try and handle quality of life issues that come up. So if you'd like a contact that would be useful, we're happy to pass that on. And just to they have been part of forming this, and we're working with them very closely to try and understand how to improve on some of these the enforcement challenges we see, which of course are around the noise code or around loitering. Like, we know that there's sort of a complicated thing here. Look, the reality is we're saying in zoning today that that it's illegal the second somebody moves their body, which is, a really, kind of weird thing for zoning to do. We don't think it's practical. We don't think it's really like, a reasonable thing in New York City to say that like there's a zoning rule against like the free expression of movement. But we really are sensitive to the idea that like these larger clubs like can create noise and quality of life issues. And so we tried to split the difference here and say, look, these rules that we have on the books today that allow for a rock show, but not a comedy club, but do control for size, we've tried to consolidate, but keep that as sort of the hinge here and say small ones are okay, large ones are not okay. And in doing that, try to, like balance those real challenges. But, I hear you. I know that a lot of what the boards do is really trying to work through those quality of life issues. So, respect that work, and we're happy to do what we can to help you connect to the colleagues that we work with, who are really trying to do the best on continuing to improve some of those enforcement issues.
you do understand that it's your not your agency, city planning, it's the NYPD that actually reaches out to us and tries to work with us through the SLA so that we can deny. And even then, we sometimes as a board vote. Triple deuce was an example that NYPD and the SLA said no. And they still got their liquor license. So I'm just saying as
Yeah.
a city, you have this economic opportunity. I don't think that, because again, you've not explained how you're changing. This is probably the one specific example where you're saying you're trying to make it easier. There are other examples where you talk about loading zones and all these other things. I'm curious, and I don't want to belabor this, so I want to get to those things because we're experiencing that right now on White Plains Road. So I'm anxious to hear the other
Yeah.
examples. I'd like you to be as specific as possible because we have to vote on this. So continue.
Okay. Next goal, goal 3. Sorry. Oh, okay. I will go through this a little bit quicker just because Carolyn spoke to this a little bit earlier when she was answering some questions. So, goal 3 is to foster vibrant neighborhoods. There are 3 proposals within this. Proposal number 12 is to promote better ground floor designs. And we're proposing to create a consistent and comprehensible baseline set of rules for commercial ground floor design, ones that are more responsive in areas with greater pedestrian activity and more relaxed in the city's more auto-oriented corridors. Proposal 12 is to reduce conflicts with auto repair. And we're proposing to rationalize and consolidate um, the range of auto servicing uses and zoning into 2 categories, light and heavy vehicle repair and maintenance. Heavy vehicle maintenance must be licensed by the state DMV and would continue to be allowed in industrial areas, while light vehicle repair would locate elsewhere after appealing to the BSA. And lastly, proposal 14 would enable micro distribution. And we're proposing to create a new type of use and zoning called a micro distribution facility and allow these businesses to locate a small scale in commercial areas, encouraging deliveries to shift to alternative modes of transportation and regulating the creation of local hubs for safe and sustainable deliveries to occur. Does anyone have any questions on this part? And this would be orange tier B. Okay. And then, yes. Okay. And then this is goal 4. And after I finish going through these, I have the applicability maps and they show specifically which ones based on like if it's a C1 district or if a C2 district, which proposals those are of specific concern to. So goal 4, which is the last goal, is to create new opportunities for local businesses to open. 15, proposal 15 is campus commercial. And what we're proposing here would be to create a CPC authorization to allow up to 15,000 square feet of commercial space in existing or new construction on a large-scale residential campus, giving residents greater access to basic necessities or the space to grow a new business. Proposal 16 pertains to corner stores. And what we're doing is creating a discretionary pathway where a business would initiate a process to locate a new corner store, provided that the store does not generate any environmental concerns or traffic congestion. Proposal 17, we're almost at the end, is adapting spaces for industries like film. And what we're doing is we're expanding the zoning toolkit so that businesses can initiate a process to waive some zoning rules on a case-by-case basis. And we're looking at this because businesses often lack options for waiving certain non-FAR, floor area ratio, floor related zoning rules. For instance, film studios often struggle to build sound stages because of certain zoning rules like yard requirements or setback heights, or a clothing store, for example, might want to expand to occupy an empty second floor, but find that size limitations or location rules prevent them from doing so. And lastly, proposal 18 is for new loft style zoning districts. And we're proposing to create a range of new job-intensive zoning districts at a range of densities and heights that expand the zoning toolkit for future rezonings. Does anyone have any questions for any of the proposals that I just went through in Goal 4? Okay, go through. So this right here is the existing conditions for Bronx Community District 12. Is everyone able to see it? I see the orange bar at the top, and I hope it doesn't mess with the visibility of the slide. Okay, so I will go through some of these figures. There are about 20,400 jobs in Bronx Community District 12. And this is the private sector employment. It is at a rate of about like 94% of the level that it had been before the pandemic. So jobs have not fully recovered. And that figure, as you can see, is slightly lower than the Bronx, which is then slightly lower than New York City. So there are more than 2,000 storefronts in this community district. Oh, hello? Oh, okay.
Good.
Okay, sorry, disembodied voice. So in there are a little over 2,000 storefronts in Bronx Community District 12 that are located on neighborhood streets and along commercial corridors, and this is shown in the map over here. This is the district. You can see most of these corridors are the where the storefronts are located. These are some of the spaces that were uplifted by some of the committee members and also spoken about by Carolyn and Nate. About 8% of these storefronts are vacant, so it's about 160 storefronts, and that's a rate that's lower than both the Bronx average storefront vacancy rate and NYC's overall vacancy rate. So these are all the zoning districts that I'm going to go through. And this is the map to the right. And then to the left are the proposals that I went through that apply to the specific zoning districts. So this right here, the first map is C1 districts. And this would be about like White Plains Road between East 230th Street and East 236th Street, along East Gun Hill Road and Tilden Street to Wilson Avenue, and Burke Avenue between Olinville Avenue and Bronxwood Avenue. The proposals that would that affect C1 are proposals 2, proposals 3, 5, 6, 7, and I can go through those because I know it could be maybe like a little disembodied just going through them like very quickly like that. So proposal 2 would be, sorry, would be this, would allow for the same uses as C2 districts. Proposal 3 would allow clean production businesses up to 5,000 square feet. Proposal 5 allows commercial uses on second floor. And 6, simplified and modernized use terms. This is specifically what Carolyn was talking about with some of the outdated and no longer used terms that we have in the zoning resolution, just updating those and putting ones that actually pertain to businesses that are being operated today or that people want to operate today. Proposal 7 would fix enclosure rules and allow indoor agriculture. 9 pertains to eating, and so this is for nightlife. Proposal 9 is for nightlife. Proposal 10 would be the indoor amusements. 12 goes along with some of the design guidelines that Carolyn was speaking about. 13 would pertain to, I believe, the, hold sorry. This would pertain to the light and heavy uses for manufacturing for auto. And then 14 is micro distribution facilities that are allowed up to 2,500 square feet. Does anyone have any questions about this one, the C1 districts?
Yes, and I just want to say thank you so much for going over this. I know we have a lot of questions. Really appreciate all of these answers, and your time. I was wondering what a clean production business is. Not exactly familiar with that term.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, it's a I'll just say as a side note, we were learning today about some of the zoning changes that have been made in Baltimore, and very similar to this clean production proposal, and they called it an art gallery proposal. I was like, oh, that's actually quite intuitive. So what we're talking, you know, think about your small scale ceramics maker, your small, you know, woodworking shop, your, it's maybe a apparel maker, a print shop, as well as a food maker, right? Somebody, you know, who like, manufactures tortillas, or jars pickles, or, you know, or anything really. Those are uses that we think not only are perfectly safe to include on a regular retail street, but actually there's a lot of reasons for them to be there. They're closer to customers, they're operating a lot like a retail store, but we don't allow them. Again, back because the 1960 zoning thought that all producers were necessarily spewing, you know, out of a smokestack. So so what we've done is created a new definition of production uses that can be in commercial districts and don't have to be in industrial districts. So what's the protections on that? Whose doesn't include, right? So there are rules that the zoning looks to, you know, if the Department of Environmental Protection that, you know, controls for the use of emissions, right? So if you, you know, we already have standards on the books for like, are you the kind of business that has to have like dirty, you know, dirty smoke or whatever? If you're that kind of business, you're not allowed in the commercial districts. This isn't creating a space for you. If you have solvents or chemicals on site, that would mean that you have like, you know, that you have to report on hazardous materials. This isn't for you, right? You're not, that this doesn't allow you to go in there, right? So those are identified kinds of industrial businesses that there are other codes that are regulating them. They exist in the city, but they're allowed in the industrial areas. We're not allowing them newly into commercial areas, but we would be allowing in anybody who basically doesn't trigger those environmental hazards. So a pretty wide berth, right? But like people who make stuff, right? People who make stuff and don't create dust or noise, or you know, create or sort of chemical fumes.
Thank you. So to that point, Carolyn, is it that we don't have enough space in our N1 zones for this use now? That we have to open up our commercial corridors for this?
You know, it doesn't hurt. We've heard a lot of advocacy from industrial areas that there's a lot of competition for space. But it's not just that. We think, again, as I said, they actually are good, right? We were talking to Baltimore because Baltimore did this a couple of years ago, and they've got breweries and like cool stores like making kombucha and like weird, you know, belt manufacturers like on their retail streets mixed in. We think that's a good thing, and we think that you know, there's an enormous community of makers and creators in this city. Why should we limit where they can find space? And we think it, particularly in a time where the city has elevated vacancies in storefronts, could be you know, a resource for streets that are struggling, right? Like, why, if you have a street that has multiple storefronts that are empty, why are we taking out of play a whole class of businesses that would be good neighbors? So it's a combination of all those things. Cities across the country are way ahead of New York City on allowing for like light industrial businesses in their commercial areas. We've seen that, that can be a real add-on vibrancy. We think there's, again, it's like helping small businesses. And if it, makes a little bit more room in the M areas, like we think that's icing on the cake.
So, I mean, again, I'm a traditionalist, I guess. Community boards serve a role, they serve a purpose. You have mechanisms already within the Department of Buildings where they can use judgments. The borough commissioners are allowed to do that. You have the Board of Standards Appeals, BSA, when something doesn't conform to zoning and they still want to be able to build something to go to BSA. Again, you're sort of making a one-size-fits-all for the rest of the city, where, again, every community board will tell you there are certain, differences. We went through a rezoning because we have two major train lines, White Plains Road and Dyer Avenue. All the stuff that I've heard here for the commercial districts already in our zoning for White Plains Road and the 3 blocks, White Plains to Bronx Boulevard and White Plains to Walden. The high glazing, all of that stuff. We haven't seen that much difference here in White Plains Road. What's so significant about this that's going to spur storefront occupancy?
So maybe I'll jump in on the first points, which is like, I think you're right there. Nothing, what we're doing here isn't going to reduce the role, or it's not going to eliminate the role of DOB in making tough calls, and it's not going to remove the role of BSA in certain cases. But for what I just talked about, like for clean manufacturing, actually, there's no way either of those two outlets would necessarily work for you. In the case of DOB, well, if you're really a retail shop, they might call you a store and let it slide. There's some, some wiggle room there. But if you're not, right, if they don't have an interpretation path for you, DOB can't allow you. They can't just override what the zoning says. And the zoning is really clear that industrial businesses are not allowed in commercial areas. And the same with BSA. If you have a hardship argument, they might allow you. But if you're just a normal business who just wants to occupy a storefront, BSA has no path for you there. And by the way, I think it's a pretty high bar to ask, this could be, a small business that's like been making, stuff in your home, trying to get into your first storefront, to ask them to go to BSA to be allowed to occupy a space that any other business could occupy. We think that's a bridge too far. So on that one, we do think that this is something that makes sense citywide. For all of our commercial streets, we, the harms that could come from that, around fumes or emissions, we've been really careful to design the rules to protect against. But we don't see a reason to not just allow that class of businesses. Now, the second question I think you asked is, how there's sort of two built in there. One is, I think you mentioned, like, you've gotten some of those protections through rezonings, and that's great. We think that, there's just a challenge that so much of the city hasn't seen, unless you have the opportunity to be part of an intensive rezoning, you miss out on a lot of improvements to zoning, right? And that's why we have whole areas of the city, most of your districts, where the zoning does go back to 1960, right? Because it takes so long and so much effort to update a neighborhood that anyone who doesn't have that opportunity gets left behind. So this is really an effort to bring all our neighborhoods and all our commercial streets up to those standards. And it is by nature a citywide effort, because we've left so many commercial streets behind in that respect. It doesn't necessarily mean, as you say, what our role here is in improving the zoning is to make it a little easier for businesses and to get the zoning out of the way, from making really stupid bureaucratic errors. Investing in a business is not just about the zoning, as I think we all know. It's really hard to open a business in New York City. we're not the only regulatory constraint in a lot of ways. Getting the investment to open is really hard. You know, there are a lot of other things that govern, you know, the kinds of outcomes we're seeing in the city. And there are a lot of challenges that are also not related, you know, only related to zoning. So, you know, I think we'd be the first to acknowledge this only goes so far. We're also working really closely with our colleagues at the Small Business Services, who are doing a lot to try and get resources out to individual businesses and to corridors. As I mentioned, we're working with nightlife. We're working with the mayor's office of urban agriculture that's trying to incent urban growing in the city. We're working with the Economic Development Corporation that's making other kinds of investments. So there's a lot of angles that the city is trying to tackle here to try and get the kinds of investments we want to see. None of them alone is in any way, you know, a magic wand, but we know even if it doesn't go all the way, getting the zoning, you know, into good shape, based on the recommendations of the hundreds of businesses and groups we've heard, you know, it will help.
To follow up on George's question, I mean, the goal though is to obviate going in front of the BSA on a lot of these calls, right? Isn't that the whole purpose of this? To not have to spend $30,000 on an attorney and be in front of the BSA for a year? Isn't that what we're trying to do?
For some of these, right? So I think in general, you're right. The goal is to make it a little bit easier to get through the process, right? So sometimes the process is hiring an expediter at DOB to just figure out what you're supposed to do, right? So that's not about the BSA. It's not about making your hardship claim. It's about just like the rules are super complicated and only like these special people know how to get through them. Sometimes there are things that we require a BSA waiver for. You know, or where a hardship case might make it possible, where we are saying like, hey, let's just make it a little bit easier. Trying to think of an example of that here. Maybe allowing commercial on the second floor. So here, for instance, you know, today in most of our cases, you might have a doctor's office up on the second floor, and then that space goes vacant. There you might have a case to the BSA that says like, hey, I've got this vacant space. I can't put anything in it. Can I just put a different kind of office, you know, that isn't a doctor? And the BSA might say that that's reasonable. So in this case, we're saying, let's just make that possible. In other cases, we're actually introducing new BSA waivers, right? Like, so for auto repair, as I was mentioning earlier, we're using the BSA permit process to make sure that we have that operational control, you know, even as we continue to allow auto businesses to locate. So it's not a one size fits all. In general, you're right. The intent is to make the process just a little bit more rational. But you know, we have different levers, right? There's things that are allowed as of right. There are things that are allowed as of right up to a certain size or with, you know, with certain conditions. There are things that are allowed only through a permit. Then there are things that are not allowed. So we're, for each of these proposals, you know, changing those dials just a little bit.
So if I want to change a 8th floor office space to a disco, 200 people, how would that change under this text amendment?
Can I ask you for a location? I just want to understand what kind of zoning district we're talking about. Are we in Midtown or are we in CB12?
Here in CB12.
So in CB12, I don't think you have, I think any of those 8-story office buildings would probably be in a C2 district, where the zoning above the second story would not be allowing for any discos. Actually, it wouldn't allow it for on the second story either. So the allowing for a disco, I like disco. We it's not a defined term in zoning. Eating and drinking establishment with scheduled entertainment, but a disco. You could do that on a higher floor in a central business district, but I think the only place where that applies in very the C4, but the C4 has a complicated rule. So there, I would say there's nowhere in your district where that would be possible.
All right, so what about retail? I'll make another example. What if I have a retail floor front, street front, and I want to make it into a physical culture establishment. How would this change that application?
We removed special permits for physical cultural establishments through a citywide text amendment in 2021. So those are legal today, and those would be legal tomorrow. This proposal has no effect on a physical culture establishment.
All right, so let me just say something silly. This is Community Board 12, so being specific to Community Board 12, our commercial areas are Boston Road, some Bronxwood, White Plains Road, Gun Hill Road. I say all these because they're also mixed residential. So I would think our second floor uses here are all residential apartments. Are you now saying that, you know, we've already eliminated in this district on White Plains Road, for example, the requirement for parking because housing is the imperative, yet now you're saying commercial use is the imperative? Is that at odds with what the city is trying to do in building affordable housing now that you're clearing the way for second
Yeah.
floors to be?
Yeah,
So,
it's a really great question. So I would not say that commercial space is the imperative. In fact, I think right now the city probably has a little bit too much commercial space. We're not really looking to create more commercial space as much as we are trying to make sure that the commercial space we have can get reused and repurposed, right? So this proposal about second story is really about, again, like where you have somebody who already built out a second story doctor's office and it's vacant and they can't, you know, and they're not able to reoccupy it with other commercial uses, that this makes it a little bit easier. Now for, if you have a building already today that has second story residential, the chances are that this proposal doesn't help, you know, wouldn't allow you to do commercial anyway. And the reason is we require separate physical access between the commercial and the residential. So think about when you see in a doctor's office on a second story, usually it's got, you know, like a stairway up to the second story that's treating it like retail. And then the residences are accessed through an elevator or through a ground floor lobby that has a different set of staircases, right? The building was designed to have that second story, commercial unit. The zoning is just, restricting what can happen in that unit. Renovating an existing residential building to create that condition is really, really hard. So aside from like, you know, let's hope that it's a rent stabilized building and nobody can get kicked out anyway, you know, you'd have to actually build a second set of stairs or an elevator. There are sound attenuation requirements built in here too to separate the commercial and the residential portions of the building. So really, really hard to do in that existing condition. A new building that got built here could, you know, take advantage of this and put some second story retail in and then put the residential above. But where we really think this is useful is things like Midtown, where you're talking about a vacant office building and somebody wants to turn part of that into, you know, residences. But to do that, you would have to kick out the offices above. So like we work on the 31st story of a building in Lower Manhattan. If they've got 6 elevator banks in our building. It's a big building. If they wanted to start turning some of the lower floors into residences, they'd have to kick us out because they literally can't have the commercial above the residential. So that's where we think that works. And we think, you know, again, like the doctor's office on a second story is where that's useful, but there's just a lot of those other physical requirements that come into play there. And by the way, we really do care about housing, and I hope the board spends as much time with our housing opportunity team as you're spending with us, because that will be coming your way in a few months too. And we really are trying to pull out all the stops to think about the ways to integrate more housing opportunities into every neighborhood.
So my last question will be, again, we're very cutting edge as a community board. We have bike lanes. We're the first community board in the Bronx or in the city that has elevated train station that has bike lanes. At least that's what I'm told. So I say all this because one of the compromises was FDNY, and building those bike lanes and getting the fire department to agree to them was the creation of loading zones every other block, which we have. And I don't know, maybe you can go to Google Earth right now and look up any address at 4101 White Plains Road, which is our address here, or any address on White Plains Road, 233rd Street, all the way down to Gun Hill. And you'll see what those loading zones look like. So when you talk specifically about public delivery plazas or creating loading zones or making them more innovative, how do you define that in practicality? Because again, we've gone to the NYPD to enforce the law. People are angle parking. They're parking in the bike lane. And again, this is where I feel like the city is at odds with itself because you have certain agencies pushing certain things, which are great. We voted in favor of it. We're supportive of these efforts. But then you have other parts of the city that are doing absolutely nothing. You're putting the cart before the horse. And it's very similar for this rezoning. You just said that you have plenty of commercial space, yet here we are reinventing the wheel because you want to mimic what Baltimore is doing.
Well, we learned a few things from Baltimore, but I certainly wouldn't, I think that Baltimore could also learn an awful lot from New York City. So I don't want to overplay my comment there.
We are the greatest city in
Again,
the world.
So amen to that. Pardon?
You haven't articulated why we need to do this. So for example, I'm imagining, you said tacos. There's a place in Queens that we like. There's a restaurant, it's a Mexican restaurant. They make their own tortillas. And they've gotten so famous that they're exporting their tortillas. Yet they're still operating out of a commercial use group 6 restaurant on, I forget what boulevard it is, in Queens. And the thing is, it works for them because they've had to relocate that operation of creating the tortillas to a manufacturing district because they were getting complaints from people who were pulling up, double parking, you say, oh, it's okay, we're gonna create all these loading zones, or we're gonna create places where people are gonna wanna walk to. That works in Manhattan. It doesn't work in other places like the Bronx. Well, I live across the city mall, by the way.
I walk all the time in this thing.
I'm sorry?
Next to mall.
Yeah, next to the mall. Yeah, next to, they're famous. They've been highlighted by the Food Network and all these other places. Anyway, like I said, they moved it because they wanted to be mindful of the other people that were there. And I travel all across the city. I don't live in New York, in Manhattan. I live in the Bronx. I live in Co-op City. And Luke, I have a family of 2 grown men, teenagers, and my wife. And for us to go food shopping, I don't have a Whole Foods down my block. I would have to make several trips if I walked. And I do have supermarkets, but again, in the reality that I live in the New York that I live in, I need a car. Because there is no bus that comes directly from Co-op City to 4101 White Plains Road. So I'm here tonight at 8:24 at night. It's pitch black outside. When I go home tonight, after shutting this down and making sure I'm closing up the building, and maybe 9:30, not a big problem. I'm a big guy. I'm gonna be okay. But other people take those things into consideration. So what I'm saying is, you're laying out proposals that don't play. Putting light manufacturing uses, somebody who makes kombucha on White Plains Road, that might be fine for now, but what happens when they do get famous? They're gonna have to move anyway, because right now we get complaints. Again, Luke, you've complained that there are people parked in the bike. There's somebody parked right in the bike lane right now in front of my building. NYPD has done nothing.
That's different. I'm just saying, let's get through this proposal because there's more slides here.
Oh, there was, I'm sorry, I thought we were done. I mean, because.
No, I have a couple more slides, but
Yeah, I think we were just walking through more of the applicability.
yeah, I mean, these are more like visual, and like I had said before, I had shared this with George, and I mean, the members can look at this on their own time. Like, we're more just concerned about like questions you may have and just getting this information out here because, it like this is pretty like everything on the slides is pretty, you know, laid out, but, you know, having an opportunity to ask your questions and having us just know what the issues that you're interested in is like really important. So, I mean, I'm happy to go through this like a little bit quicker, and then, you know, we can get to the end. And actually,
How many more slides
at
do you
the
have?
Hmm?
How many more slides do you have?
16, about 10.
All right, so we won't ask questions. Go.
It's okay. Like ask questions. Like you have you want to know things.
8:30.
Like
We
that's
want
the
to get
point.
out of here soon.
Yeah.
And you're on the clock. You gave us only 60 days to do this, so.
Fair point. Okay. So,
And if I can on that, I just want to uh continue to let the board know, we will be accepting recommendations, up to the day that city planning votes on this. So we know that, that the 60 days is tough. This is complicated. If the board isn't able to vote in that period, like, please don't be discouraged from continuing to send us questions or sending us a late recommendation. We know we're hearing that from other boards. We certainly know that, we're going to be taking this into account like throughout. So just wanted to, make that note.
okay. So I will go through the next couple maps. C4, the proposals that apply, it's this little part over here. And let me just check my little map. And the part that connects with, I am so sorry, my words are failing me. It's about Boston Road between East 213th Street and Eastchester Road. So the proposals that are of interest for that district are proposals 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, and 14. So there isn't any C5, there aren't any C5 districts or parts in Community Board 12. So these are these next two slides, this one for C5 and C6 are pretty much just for illustrative purposes. And there's also no special purpose districts in the community district for CB12. So again, this is just for illustrative purposes, but most of the district is residential. So the proposals that affect the district are proposals 1, proposals 11, 15, and 16. And then, as you can see, the manufacturing is there, big concentrations of manufacturing, like the eastern part of the district. This, I believe, is near the New England Thruway, with the New York Thruway to the New England Thruway to the south, and then there's Boston Road to the south and Provost Avenue to the west. And then the Givon Avenue area, which is between Grace Avenue, Eli Avenue, Edson Avenue, and East 222nd Street. And the proposals that affect M districts within Bronx Community District 12 are proposals 4, 6, 17, and 18. Went through that one. This right here is, these are the last 3 slides of my presentation, and then we can get back to the questions. This is how feedback can be, how you can give feedback. Again, I shared this with George, so please feel free to like pull this out. And on the next slide, there is this email here that if you want to get in contact with the project team, if you have any specific questions that maybe we can't get to right now, or if there's just anything else you'd like to add. And then this slide here is the 4 goals of this citywide text amendment divided between the 18 proposals and then the primary ZR sections that you can find them in. So that is pretty much my presentation. Please let me know what questions people might have, and I can just go back to the slides just to have it up and maybe help with just answering specific questions.
Do you have any questions?
Say,
It's a lot of information to absorb.
I have a question for the committee. So how do we want to handle this? Because it seems like there are two ways we could do it. We could simple yes or no.
oh, we can let them go before we discuss it.
Okay.
We have
So
questions.
so there's either the yes or no kind of standard thing, or there's this worksheet where we talk about specific things. Like, let's say we don't like their one thing, or we like this proposal. We can take it on a point by point basis. You know?
We can have the worksheet.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Carolyn, you're looking for a vote, which is why we're doing the land use meeting and the public hearing at the same time. And then I wasn't clear. It's January 4th, the drop dead date?
It's not. It's the technical deadline to receive these, but it is the practice of DCP to accept late submissions to us. So we have not set the date for the for our CPC's hearing yet. We think it'll be in January, but that's not set yet. And again, it would be some weeks after that before we vote. So anytime before we vote, I can't give you a firm deadline on that, but it's not January 4th. We certainly will honor and read. I will personally read very closely, any recommendations you send us. And just to give you a plug for the worksheet, it's helpful to us to really hear your feedback. We know there's 18 proposals. We know it's a lot, but it really does help us to distinguish what you're concerned about and to take that into effect if you're able to give us, specific feedback on different pieces of the proposal. So that's why we've included it.
And Luke, this is not on the zoning application portal. So this is not like a ULURP application or anything. As Carolyn just stated, you just want a letter of support or not support with whatever recommendations or not recommendations we make, right?
Just to clarify, it is in the zoning portal. I think that was uploaded last week. But it's a non-ULURP action as you described. So, yes, a vote, up or down, and if you'd like to, and we would certainly encourage you to give us, an up-down vote on each of the proposals to be more specific about your concerns, would certainly be valuable. It is not required.
No, I asked because, again, for ULURPs, you're supposed to type in and you have a process by which we tried to follow. It wasn't last week when we do 1 week notification. So what's today, Monday? Wasn't there Monday of no, we weren't here Monday of last week.
I think that's because that was before the official referral kicked, but if you have any trouble submitting, we're happy to follow up on that. I do believe it is now in the portal.
I mean, it's a moot point now, but there is a formal process for us because, again, we have to put the public hearing, unless that's different for this process.
So Ursula, I saw your hand up a while too.
I'm sorry?
No, Ursula's had her hand up.
Oh.
No, I just want to know, does this do away with the Boston Road rezoning?
No. I'm happy to answer a more specific question if there is one, but we're not changing any prior changes of zoning.
No, we were in the beginning stages and then it just like died. So I don't know if this change is made, would you guys come back to the rezoning of Boston Road? Because that, that has also some safety features in it.
I see. So I should also say, yes, this does not preclude any future rezonings, on Boston Road or anywhere else in the district. To the extent that some of the concerns raised, as it sounded like around auto repair, this citywide action may help. Well, that's obviously a good thing, but to the extent that it does not solve any challenges, all of the challenges that the board identified, certainly does not preclude that. And I think, the Bronx team here will bring that back to the, to the Bronx team. So I think DCP is always happy to continue that conversation.
All right, thank you.
Just, one last question on enforcement. So on the issue with the sidewalks and vehicles being on the sidewalks, that becomes a DOB violation then, under the new zoning.
If you have an auto use in the future that is approved under BSA, and your approval under BSA requires you to be doing all of your business within the zoning lots, and instead you are not doing that, you're doing auto repair on a sidewalk, then it's already a violation of DOT to be doing business on the sidewalk, right? The problem is the enforcement. This would give additional teeth in the sense that that the BSA permit could be revoked.
Who does enforcement for BSA? Because BSA doesn't do it.
The BSA does do it, but it's at the time of the approval. So the BSA permits are not in perpetuity. You've got to come back, and BSA can pull you back up if you're out of compliance, right? So, you know, if the board, for instance, noticed that a facility that had been licensed under BSA was not operating in compliance with its BSA permit, you could bring that to the BSA, and the BSA could potentially revoke the permit.
1135 East 222nd Street has been operating without a BSA permit. I attended the hearing today. The commissioners all voted against it months ago. It is still operating as an auto body shop. And I said, shut it down. And they said, no, that is buildings department. We don't do that.
Right. So in other words, the permit does not exist, but they're operating illegally anyway.
We have plenty of BSA
Yeah.
out of whack variant. As a matter of fact, we have a storage facility at 2825 Edson Avenue that we have held off on giving them the BSA permission to go forward because they have to build out the sidewalk. And they're only now, 2 years later, after we approved it, getting it done. And they've been without a BSA permit. So again.
Yes, so you are correct. The DOB is who can kick people out for operating illegally.
One another. And, oh, it's not my responsibility, it's DOT. We reach out to DOT, no, that's DOB. No, they need a BPP, oh no, they need this, they need that. This is why I'm saying I get frustrated and I have to demonstrate this in front of my board members because they're the ones that come to me with the complaints. And I think, you know what? We have to get them on the technicality. We have to get them on BSA because when they came for the BSA, we said, no, we're not going to say yes until you build out the street. And so they've been operating and they're trying to make a good faith effort, but everything that you just said is not true. They're operating without a permit right now. And you have several businesses in Community Board 12 that are operating without BSA permits. Some that have gone so far as that even after 10 years of not having a permit, my understanding is that then you relinquish the right at all. It reverts back to what it used to be. That's what zoning says, but that's not what BSA allows. BSA will let them come and suspend the right and come before the board for a vote. Even if it's older than 10, the corner of Baychester and Strang, we have a diner that has not been a diner for over 20 years now?
20 years, not 20 years.
20 years. And they want to be a bank 20 years later. It's supposed to be a residential neighborhood. It's supposed to be the Bank of America. A gas station at 1135 East 233rd Street. The Cinco gas station that came here. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. Luke had a thing. You guys we can vote. And then we can, as Luke suggested, we either vote in favor or you can make recommendations based on X.
Do we have to?
Good. Well, you know, the deadline is January 4th.
Okay, so we have time.
Well, no, it's not time. It's that we don't meet. The Thursday, the 16th is
Our board.
It's our full board. So, and then we don't meet in December. And we don't meet in January in time for this 4th. Our meeting in January is the 20th. Yeah, so you have to vote. But again, to Carolyn's point, you can make recommendations after the fact. We got Luke.
So it's,
File 13.
it seems like this, series of proposals, do you mind actually keeping that one slide up?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, thanks.
Oh, no, it's fine. Right before, I know you're gonna talk, but someone in our was telling me that there's someone with a hand up, and I don't know if we've heard from him most of the session, so I just wanted to be cognizant of making sure we get to his point.
Who has it?
Yes, this is Robert Hall. I just heard what George Torres said, and I just wanted to state on Gun Hill and White Plains Road, we have, upon approach to that intersection, we have a 99-cent store. Then we have a gentleman who sells pictures all on the wall. Then we have our corner store. And then on the other side of the corner store, we have double parked cars with illegal taxis. Now that is exactly what it is on the northeast corner of Gun Hill and White Plains Road. Just to circumvent what was just said as to what is actually going on at the intersection of Gun Hill and White Plains Road. So, and I also wanted to state, I know in the interest of time, we have to go forward, and you just discussed that, George. We could probably do something the end of January at the best because of what we have upcoming with all of our meeting is in the next few days. And then from that point on, we're in 2024. So I just want you to be cognizant of that as we go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, but if we wait until the end of January, we missed the window. I think we missed it for the carbon neutrality. Yeah.
No, we didn't. Well, the committee voted, not the full. The full.
So that intersection of White Plains Road and Gun Hill Road is a really good example of where, from my reading of this, that corridor could be improved. So we just had, right next to the funeral home, a parking lot was developed into a residential building. You probably walk there, I walk there whenever I walk back from the train. And the street face of that is a brick wall. And it's a brick wall all the way around that building. Sounds like this proposal would say, hey, you can't just build a blank wall on Gun Hill Road. You have to do something with that blank wall. You got to put some windows in it. You have to put a ground floor retail.
For new buildings.
For new buildings.
Yes, I know.
So.
No, but the thing is that happened after the rezoning, and that's less than 3 blocks away. So why wasn't that subject to the glazing?
So I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what glazing requirement you're referring to, but I'm saying that like between that 99-cent store and that deli, it's a blank wall. If a building goes in there, they're going to be required. The only reason that guy's selling paintings is because it's a blank wall. Nobody else is using it. I think there's aspects of this proposal that deal with entrepreneurs in our neighborhood who feel like they have to either get out of the neighborhood to expand their business. Why do you have to go to the IBZ in Eastchester if you want to do some kind of light manufacturing? Let's say you have a 3D printing thing. You make like plastic kind of cool artwork. You can.
It uses hazardous materials.
So let's say there's a
I'll give you-
3D printing that isn't hazardous. Okay, why can't we have that on Gun Hill Road, on White Plains Road? There are entrepreneurs in this neighborhood who have to go elsewhere. People who cut hair in their apartment have to do it secretly, even though there may be really good hair cutters. This allows for home occupation.
We got a whole ton of vacant stores on White Plains Road.
Yeah, the opportunity, the reason that they do that, Luke, is not because they're
They don't want
lacking.
to pay taxes.
No, it's not the taxes. They don't want to pay rent. So they don't want to pay rent to the guy who runs the shop or the woman who runs that shop. You have to pay for the chair. So I don't know what that is, $250 a week, $300 a week. Oh, I'll just cut hair out of my house and have everybody come to my place. That I go to a barber shop, but that's what happened when the pandemic hit and everything shut down. You didn't see the beard I grew. But when I came back, like, oh, I'm gonna go, and George was like, I can't, we're still not allowed to open.
But if you're a barber, the barriers that it has for you to access your customers are very high. And this is saying that, hey, let's make it easier for people to get their toe in. So let's say you want to, you do cut hair on the 6th floor of your residential building. You want to advertise, make it illegal without the DOB coming knocking on your door and saying, hey, your eviction is.
No, but this is what's making it legal.
This would make it legal.
And you think that a neighbor who lives right next door, my barber's fairly popular. That's why he has a shop, because he has tons of people
Yeah,
coming.
but it's just dangerous, right? Because
Yeah, so you're gonna have people lining up in your house or on the hallway, and
So-
you're gonna have strangers walking in your
So
hallway.
you're picturing a really booming business, which is, if it got started on the 6th floor on White Plains Road, that's awesome. But I think when you're an entrepreneur trying to get your foot in, you don't have the money or means to rent a first floor on White
I
Plains
think you're
Road.
wrong.
If you get your start on your 6th floor in your apartment, let's say the lines are expanding, then you maybe expand your business to that first floor. But this is helping.
But, there are other barriers to entrepreneurship.
No, I agree with you, but you're right.
No, but I'll give you a perfect example.
So state licensing, so there are some theories in economics that the whole point of jumping through hoops for state licensing, like a nail salon needs a license. I think a barber probably needs. Is gonna limit competition. So there are layers of barriers, I guess.
I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying, Ursula and I sit here and we get the applications. How many cannabis applications have we received? I think we got 5 or 7?
No, I got 7 now.
7. 7 applications. 4 or 3 of them are on White Plains Road.
For the same
Yeah, for White Plains Road, and then we got one for Bronxwood Avenue. Is that something that, and again, that's not even, that's regulated by, they have to get a lease and everything, but that's also similar to the SLA. They're gonna have to go to the state office of cannabis and deal with that. We're gonna have a meeting with the borough president's office later. But I'm gonna give you a perfect example. Ursula and I got a phone call from ATF. There was a guy, an entrepreneur, Luke, that wanted to turn an auto body shop into a gun manufacturer.
Right, so
So
we have
that's-
to be cautious. We
If
gotta-
that's something that we want,
So are you insinuating that gun manufacturers would be permissible through these new zoning?
maybe, I don't know, because,
Well, let's ask so that we don't jump to conclusions.
no, but I did ask. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I called the buildings department and I said, where does gun manufacturing, because they weren't manufacturing. Let me take that back. They were already taking the finished product and assembling it.
Yeah,
They weren't
assembly.
building anything. They were just taking, again, I don't know what the pieces of a gun are. They were taking the stock, the barrel,
Putting everything together.
and putting everything together and then going to sell it. And the ATF came because it was a use group 6. It's already permissible. That's what, everything on White Plains Road right now is a use group 6. Everything on all the commercial, restaurants, all the stuff that they're saying, but and you can correct me, Carolyn or Brenna, you're wanting to do more. You want it to be more permissible to do these certain things without having to go to BSA or having to go anyplace else so that there can be a check on whether we want it or not.
So just to clarify, gun manufacturing is not legal. We're certainly not changing that. There are a few uses in here that we are expanding use of, as of right. Pardon?
It wasn't manufacturing. Like I said, they were taking the finished product and assembling it and wanting to sell it. And again, we got a call from the ATF as a community board. And I went to the buildings department and they went through their thing. ATF ultimately came back and said, no, we can't do this anyway. Don't worry about it. But that took.
But building department gave us the runaround.
Yes, the building department did not get to us. And that's, Carolyn, my objection is not necessarily to what you're proposing. My objection is to how the city implements this and handles the aftermath of it. Because what we're dealing with now, you've not addressed. You've not spoken to the bike lanes on White Plains Road and the fact that everybody is, you know, violating the loading zones. You're saying we're gonna create these things, and then you did it, and yet nobody's enforcing it. So what's the
So,
point of saying,
George,
okay, well, it's
I did
legal?
want to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just did want to, because you had mentioned it earlier. I did want to clarify that there's nothing about this proposal that is changing DOT's loading zones. I think maybe you were responding to the proposal 4 about loading dock rules. Is that where you're
Can you
where
clarify,
you were thinking we were talking about loading zones?
can you clarify what that proposal is?
Yeah. So we did skip over it fairly quickly. What we're doing regarding loading docks, so the way loading docks, and I just even be clear about what we're talking about. This, yeah, we need this picture. A loading dock from a zoning perspective is when you are building a new building, that you have to put a berth into the side of your building so that trucks can pull into the building. We have a formula that generates how many loading docks a building needs to build. However, that formula applies to changes of use as well. So the condition that happens is, let's say I'm an office building, and let's say I have 2 loading docks. But now I want to change and take what had used to be a medical office and put a 3D printer into that space. Well, the 3D printer has a different loading dock requirement under zoning that's higher, and it might trigger me to have a 3rd loading dock, but the building is already built. So in order to actually put a new tenant of a different kind into that office building, zoning tells you you need to cut a hole in the side of the existing building. What we're saying here is that that's silly, and that we shouldn't, like, loading rules are a good idea for new buildings, but like parking, we don't want to have the tenant be the moment that we trigger a new requirement, right? If you built a parking garage, we don't make you build a new parking garage based on the new office tenant. The same here, we don't want to make you build a new loading berth because it's not practical to have somebody build, to cut a hole into the side of an existing building. So that's what this proposal is really about. It's about the adaptive reuse of existing commercial buildings. It's not changing the loading zone requirements with DOT. We do work closely with them, but we do not govern the use of the curved lane. We try to make sure that the proposals for different land uses make sense with what DOT is doing. But we are certainly not, we're really supportive of the loading zone idea. We think it's a good idea. The city is struggling with a lot of truck traffic and figuring out ways to do deliveries. We're supporting, all of the different ways to try and manage that challenge.
Nobody has anything else. I just want to say thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate the information, and we will discuss it in full.
And again, it has to be in by.
Well, thank you all really for spending so much time with us.
It has to be in by January
Yes.
4th, right? Not the end of January.
Thank you.
I say again, January 4th is the technical deadline, but if the board isn't able to meet it, we will read anything. The commission will read anything that they receive up till the day they vote. So, take that as you will. It's late, right? The deadline is January 4th, but we understand, and it wouldn't be the first time we'd received a late recommendation.
But
Okay,
unless, are we closing the meeting? Or-
No, we're closing the
Well,
presentation.
if they have, because we're gonna discuss this more, and I think Luke has some, they don't have to leave, they can stay.
They can listen, but closing the presentation so we can discuss it because it's 9 o'clock already.
Well, I'm going to take off to put my little baby to bed. So I want to thank you all so much, and please feel free to follow up through your representatives and through our email with questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It should be
Caroline.
noted too that some community boards have already applied for extensions and they were denied. So January is the drop dead date.
Well, I say again, we're not able to give a technical extension, but we will honor anything we read. So really appreciate the effort that the community is putting in.
Absolutely.
In other words, it's 421. Oh, it is. So it doesn't go through regardless.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, this is ultimately going to be decided by the city council because they're the first vote that counts.
Yeah, but the city council doesn't approve anything. It has some good parts and it has some bad parts.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 664 pages. I'm reading it.
It's very,
I gotta spend a week on this. And we gotta, I'm supposed to.
It was sent October 30th.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
very,
I got an email October 30th with all of this documentation. We're on the first one.
But
No,
that's
no,
not
what you
enough.
missed.
But I got a notice for the
It's right
meeting.
here.
I thought I had the Wakefield project on it.
It's
No,
still not enough time.
tutorial video, October 30th, this is.
No, we share every time something comes out, we share it. But listen, I think Luke raised an important point, and I don't disagree with that.
I'm sorry. Absolutely.
But
I represent small businesses in real estate transactions every day. Going in front of the Board of Standards and Appeals is not a realistic option for a small business, like the ones you're talking about. It absolutely is not. You're gonna hire an attorney for a minimum of $30,000, more likely closer to $100,000. You're gonna go through a year-long process at the Board of Standards and Appeals. It is not practical whatsoever, those kinds of uses.
And what kind of businesses are you representing?
I represent all kinds of business, so I'll represent barbershops, restaurants, I represent banks, I represent everything from small, shoe shine shop. I mean, I've done the smallest businesses to a bank in Union Square. So I've seen it all.
Why did they go to BSA?
Yeah, can you articulate like what are the reasons that you mostly encounter for a small business? Like what's the hardship that they're going to BSA to get over?
You could have like, the reason why I brought up,
That's fine.
no, I know, just go.
Yes, it's a public hearing, that's fine.
The reason why I brought up, the 2021 change, where they changed physical culture establishment.
Oh, yeah.
Culture establishment, gym.
Yeah, right.
So they changed that, they changed that like in the 80s, to make it tough to open up a physical cultural establishment, because they didn't want to have all of the massage parlors. So they made it tough. And then, I guess 2 years ago, they changed it back and they made it easier to have a physical cultural establishment. They got rid of that regulation. So I guess, but I mean, it's good because, you have a karate dojo or you have a Pilates studio, okay, they can move in. But as of before 2021, you had to go in front of the BxCB if you wanted to change the use. And a lot of times these guys, what happens with these small tenants, you get a lease with the landlord and it says the tenant is responsible for making sure you're legally complying, right, with the lease. And that you're compliant with the building uses. And so the tenant, just signs it because they want to start the business and, maybe they have an attorney reviewing the documents for a couple $1,000. They're not really looking at it but these documents that drafted these leases, they're like 60 pages long. And it puts all the onus on the tenant. So before 2021, the landlord, if there was no problem, they made a big deal out of it. If there is a problem, they go, oh, you got to go in front of the Board of Standards and Appeals. Remember, you sign a lease, and it's your responsibility, and that business is dead. And they can be responsible for a 10-year lease, even though they can't legally operate at the premises. Okay, so a lot of what they're talking about is smart and good and makes a lot of sense. The fact that it's 660 pages is a lot to digest. And, I would definitely have concerns about, where discounts can operate, things that are going to bring cars or drinking into certain neighborhoods that don't need more cars and drinking. And George made a lot of salient points, too. So I would be reluctant to.
That's fine. There's a lot of pros, but there's also a lot of cons that we gotta consider.
We went with, if you guys remember 1980 AD Avenue, that was something that we recently did. Oh, really? We'll talk about, all right.
What's the 22nd?
Right. We went through that because they couldn't go through BxA. They had to go through a rezoning. But remember, the rezoning, when they came to the community board, they wanted to capture the 4 extra houses.
Oh,
And we told, yeah, remember we told them
you
no.
had a tree in the street.
Yeah, exactly, So our requirement, and again, I don't know now if we do the rezoning, if that allows for that. They just wanted to build a daycare, but they had, forget what the technical issue was. They were overbuilt.
It was 6 feet too high.
Yeah, it was taller than what the zoning use for that allowed. And the private homes also had,
Well, they were illegal because
but
they
they were
had
conforming.
CMOs,
Yeah,
because they were too tall.
they were legal, but they were non-conforming legal occupancy. And we didn't do it because we were concerned. We excluded the private homes because we were concerned that in the future, they could come back.
And knock them down and build.
And knock them down and build a tall, and this is right smack dab in the middle of 2-story private homes. The only thing that's bigger over there was Workman Circle, which was the 3-story building, which was a rehab place for people who get hurt. So I don't want to lose that ability. So for example, also, I mean, because we're still dealing with it now. Like I'm trying to organize a site visit because we required them to build out their portion of the street.
They didn't go with it.
Huh?
They didn't go with it, Joe.
Who didn't?
They didn't do it.
No, it hasn't happened yet, but they responded. We'll talk about it offline. But the thing is, BSA is sometimes the only apple that we get to get at, because that's how we did Edson Avenue. And there's a lot of other, I mean, we have, for example, in our district, we face a lot of unfinished streets. Whether the side of the street, even where there's Edson Avenue, we did Grace Avenue, they're supposed to build out, but they're not building out Arno. You're not gonna be able to drive to Edson Avenue from Arno. It's not a through street, it's a parking lot now. And both the BSA, and remember, he wanted a lifetime. They wanted a lifetime. They didn't want to have to come back to the community. I think they got like 20 years. So we were like, no, in 20 years, we'll come back and deal with this. Go ahead, Lou.
I have a question for Robert, because some of this addresses NYCHA and activating ground floor retail spots. I was wondering, Robert, if you had any thoughts on that element of this proposal?
No. In reality, that will be a moot point, to be honest with you. There's nothing in the makings of that, nothing at all, not a thing at all, okay? The major concern in reality is across the street, just as you mentioned. And I really hope that we get a chance to talk to the people who built that building, because you mentioned that that little parking area, but that's very important. But as far as NYCHA property is concerned, it's a moot point. It really is.
They can speak to, you raised the issue, which I thought, that's a stag building that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's
all his buildings are like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Battle is the architect, they're terrible.
They're like that for a reason.
But
Yeah, well, yeah.
the street design changes that they're proposing is saying, hey, you can't just build these block faces that are just brick.
I agree with you, but
And I think that's a good thing.
well, so
Yeah, that's one of
my
the-
understanding of the zoning that happened in the beginning of the Blasio's that captured the MIH, the ZQA, was that's what it's called glazing, where you open it up, and that's what they're proposing in this. Nate or Brenna, is that what you're proposing now for most of the buildings on commercial districts?
You might have stepped away.
Nate?
Oh, sorry, could you speak again? I have like a mouthful of my dinner.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm jealous you get to eat dinner. So the changes to the zoning where you're proposing glazing for first story. Right now, my understanding is in our district, we have 2 train lines, White Plains Road. So the building that Luke is referencing is on the corner of Gun Hill and Oakville. Allison, what?
That's not Barnes. I don't know what street that is.
You know what
No,
street that
what
is?
street is that?
Say again?
The
street is
corner
that
of the building.
Holland.
Holland.
Holland, that's right, Holland.
What?
Which-
Could you tell me the street again? Sorry. The cross
Holland
streets?
and Gun Hill Road, East Gun Hill Road. And
East
Holland
Gun Hill Road. Gotcha. Okay. Trying to find it on a map.
That's about a block away from the train station. It's 1 block away from the train station.
Mhm.
And my understanding in the ZQA and the MIH was that they were supposed to put glazing, but that, I'm now thinking, they were only supposed to do that if they took the extra bulk.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Let me try. Nate, are you on the line? I'm not as familiar with that, but I definitely will follow up. But I also want to see if Nate has an answer right here and now.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one
Mhm.
either. We'll look into that and let you know.
Yeah.
But are you proposing that the glazing is for any new development, or is it just for developments that are in commercial districts?
Hmm. I
I believe it'd be just for the commercial districts.
So just where the C1 overlays are.
Yeah.
So that's like White Plains Road. I'm looking up on the zoning map now to see if that covers Holland Ave, but my phone isn't loading. But yeah, so that would be like examples where even on the west side of White Plains Road, we've got a lot of churches or businesses that have these huge block faces. And it's like, when I walk home, let's say from this meeting, it's kind of scary, walking up down White Plains Road, because things either look boarded up or there's long brick faces. And I think if, you know, we're thinking about like, what does this neighborhood look in the future? That's an excellent point. And there could be, it's right by a train line. It could be a perfect spot for a printing press. Let's say some local artist wants to make some, I don't know, custom cards.
Are you trying to open up a printing?
I don't know. When one of these presses in Cambodia. What happened?
I'll take the pen.
At one of these community board meetings, I think last term, I said, hey, is there possible to put in a ceramic studio? There's no ceramic studios in Community District 12. I love ceramics. I used to do it at Bronx River Art Center.
Yeah.
But I can't do it in this. And it's considered,
worried about ceramics.
what you're not
I'm
allowed to.
concerned about.
What you want me to
About
go.
600 pages, not about ceramics.
Yeah, but right now,
A million other uses.
let's say I'm a small business owner and I want to open a little ceramic shop to teach kids how to paint ceramics. You have to go to Eastchester Ivy Industrial Business Zone.
I hear you.
You know, and it's like, why can't we have that in places with that makes sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Guys, so this-
Page, and it's page rule, not 664 page.
Guys, so we do have to kind of like sift through the pros and the cons, but it is 9 o'clock. So we have to figure out how we're gonna do this, because I don't think we're gonna be able to do it today. So how are we gonna get this done so that we're able to really thoroughly, all of that, what are the pros?
Do you want
and
to
cons
take it to the
are?
main board with no recommendation?
But see, that's the thing. But I think that this is important because, you know, this is, we'll get to it at the main board. This is your options. We can have a discussion again at the main board, but I don't think that that's actually where we have the discussion. This is what's happening in committee.
Let's do.
So-
Can we have a committee meeting in December?
Well, we can have a full board meeting in December. It'll be the day of the party.
But the fourth Thursday is on the 22nd.
What?
The fourth Thursday of the month is December 22nd. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
21st,
You know,
December 21st.
I think we should have it on the 24th.
24th is a Sunday.
That's Christmas Eve.
So
It's a.
officially speaking, we've not, people are busy during the holidays. We try not to
You're right.
infringe on their rights to do whatever they have to do. We're having a holiday party. Technically, it's a meeting, so we take attendance and everything, but there's no formal gaveling in and gaveling out. We can do that. We can,
So could we have your committee meeting on the 11th And then,
Hold on, I have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's the other, we have a lot that, you know, people
For
use this building for their holiday
December,
stuff.
hold on, I'm trying to get my calendar now.
I do hope you get a good price.
how they came from.
We don't charge, that's why everybody comes. But again, this is where, you know, the only thing I would say to you, Luke, is I don't think that that's what's preventing anybody from doing anything. This is, I say that this is the greatest city in the world, because it is, one, but there are,
Used to be.
I watch a lot of TV, I travel in the city, and you go to other parts of the city, Brooklyn, Queens, and they have things. They have the things that I want here, and we have some of that. Arthur Avenue is a perfect example.
Well, you need Williamsburg.
Well, so you have, for example, you have the timeout night market or the market in Brooklyn, Dumbo. It's beautiful. I don't know if anybody's ever been to that. And you're like, why can't we have that in the Bronx? The Bronx is under retail. I've been fighting 20 plus years to bring more retail here. But this is, they told you, we have enough commercial space. Ursula's been advocating for a Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, and you know when they opened it in Riverdale?
Yes, I wrote them too.
Oh, they opened a Chick-fil-A in Riverdale?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll be right there.
They opened up too.
I'll be right
So,
there.
the thing, Luke, what I'm saying is that the opportunity is there. The impediment is not zoning. The impediment is the rent. It's the fees associated sometimes. Zoning doesn't solve that problem.
I think it does, because look at the example of life sciences, okay? Let's say you're a research science team and you want to open up in the district. Well, it's kind of limiting, like they said, the definitions of what science is, what laboratory is, are restricted. So what they're proposing is to make it easier to open up different life science occupations.
But you're talking about a certain population, not the whole, right? Like,
Right.
the certain.
That's what this proposal is about. It's about breaking up into all these little things, which alone aren't going to be the wand to fix everything. But let's talk about corner stores. There's a proposal in this project that says, hey, there could be a process where on corner stores in residential districts, you can open a bodega.
Wait, and we want to hear that, right?
Yeah.
But I think that because of the timing, I think what we should decide right now, is
What
when
day
we're
you
gonna
looking
get back to really fully, everybody come with your ideas, we invite other board members, right? All the board members.
Fill out those papers.
Right, and so in the meantime, I think what we should do now is discuss more. We're gonna continue this conversation at committee again. And Ursula, you're letting us know. if
What
this
day
is
you looking
available.
at?
So your meeting, Carl, land use would be Monday, December 11th. This is
Fine
second
with me.
Monday. And then that 14th is our holiday party.
Yeah.
Where we can have our.
What would you do, just open it for a vote and close it?
Yeah, but we would have the discussion at your committee meeting Monday, the 11th.
We can have a formal recommendation and really have a
Right.
thoughtful, I agree.
It would give you time to read through the 600 pages.
I wanna read.
600 pages. And then Carl can discuss, you and Carl can discuss, but we can all have the opportunity, you can discuss the pros, we can kind of see what are the cons, because there are some, right, that we need to be mindful of. And we do that. And then we're for our deadline, which is January. Correct. Can we do that?
Good.
That works? Okay.
So that, I mean.
So,
it's open
what
up
is
a
the
vote.
date?
It's one of the other question. Can I do that?
What? You said 11,
Committee is the.
Monday,
Okay,
December 11th,
Monday, the
second Tuesday.
and then the 14th would be the.
Our holiday party and this vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it makes
So,
sense.
there's a little bit of dialogue that seems to try to gloss over this whole proposal as one thing that's not gonna fix anything, but there's a lot of different things here, and I think we need to
Some stuff,
appreciate that.
some with them.
I'm not, I get you, Luke, but again, maybe I take for granted that if somebody wanted to do something in the city of New York, zoning is not what's holding them back.
4 months to get your fire certificate.
Yeah,
4 months. So if a restaurant wants to, open up.
You need your
You gotta get
sanitation.
you gotta get sanitation, you gotta get your hood approval. You're talking about 4, 5, 6 months, just the inspection. FDNY is backed up on those inspections. So you got tenants paying 4 or 5 months rent.
I'm waiting 9 months for FDNY approval. I'm waiting 9 months for FDNY approval. I email those every day.
Right.
Every day.
You gotta know something.
And the thing is, to your point on life sciences,
People know
we
what.
have hospitals here.
It's not that.
We have, Einstein, Montefiore is here. We have their Wakefield campus. They have ample opportunities to do things in their building.
They wash their hands.
As a matter of fact, Montefiore is right next door. They just shut down.
They open back up. I don't know what else, I don't know what they do. Like, should we close it?
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Is there any further discussion?
Wow.
If not, I recommend that we close this meeting.
Second.
Okay. Time is 21:16. All in favor of closing the meeting?
Aye.
So moved. All dismissed.
Thank you.
Good night. Hey, Robin, what did you come on?
Ah, I've been on channel 4 all night.
That'll be a problem.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
that's what I'm saying.
Thank you all.
Yeah, stop the recording.
Yeah, so.
Wait, no, you gotta stop the recording first.
Salados, spell that for me?
No, that's down.
The recording.
Leave the meeting.
S is in Sam,
But you gotta stop the recording.
It's already stopped.
A,
Oh, no, it's not.
A, B.
You have to stop the meeting in order to stop the.
Yeah.
So, sorry.